Good afternoon. So, I trust everybody had a decent weekend? Yeah? All right. We're going to be doing things a little bit differently starting on Thursday, right? Today is going to be the last day we're going to spend for a while on the rhetoric stuff. And you're going to be moving into reading and attempting to defend short philosophical essays. Right, so here's how we're going to do this. We're going to split the room up into two halves. I have two essays posted in each little philosophy folder in the on the Georgia View page. In fact, let me just call it up so I can show you exactly where to find what it is you're going to be looking for. And essentially what you are going to do, right, at home for Thursday, you are going to write a 500 page, geez.
You're going to write a book.
Yes, you are going to write a lengthy dissertation. No, you're going to write a 500-word short essay defending your philosopher's point of view. And then what you'll do when you come to class on Thursday, right, you will print that out, you'll bring it to class with you, rather than just uploading it to Georgia View. And you will get together with your group. So if you're in the Plato group, you'll gather with the other Plato people. If you're in the Aristotle group, you'll gather with the other Aristotle people. And together, you will work out what you think is the best defense of your philosopher's point of view. Right? You will each then have to choose a spokesperson for your group to deliver a defense. And then once you've both stated your piece, you'll go back, get back into the groups, and then you will each have time to try to figure out a response to what the other group has said. Okay? So that's how this is going to work. Now, the main reason I want you to do this is for you to get used to understanding points of view with which you don't necessarily agree. Right? Now, it's entirely possible that you don't really care all that much about the nature of reality, right? Whether ideas are real or whether specific things are real or what have you. But whether you agree with a specific philosopher or not, the person you're assigned, right, that's what you have to defend. And you have to come up with the best possible defense. You can think of it as like being like a defense attorney, right? Whether or not you think your client is innocent or guilty, whether or not you like your client, you are still legally obligated to give them the best defense you can muster. So that's what you're going to be doing for these pieces. So you'll find the Plato and Aristotle essays that I want you working with in the Being and Reality folder, right? There's a PDF there for you. And let's talk a little bit about the reflection pieces I want you to write. Okay, the directions are relatively short and simple here, right? So you're going to do a 500-word analysis of your philosopher. And I want you to pay close attention to the language that your philosopher uses, right? What specialized terms do they use? Right? What key words do they use and how do they define them? Are there particular things about their style of writing that seem to have something to do with what they're trying to argue? Do the two philosophers sometimes use the same terms but mean different things by them? Right? Those are the sorts of things I want you taking note of. I also want you to, you're going to have to read both essays, right? In order to adequately respond to counter-arguments from the other philosopher or the other philosopher's team. So I want you to try to imagine, even as you're writing this piece, how each philosopher would respond to the other's arguments. And how would they defend their particular viewpoint from attack. And again, just a reminder, right? These are not opinion pieces, right? I'm not asking you what you think about each of these philosophers. I'm asking you to try to dig in deep and understand what the philosopher is trying to say and find some way to defend it. Now, these are going to be probably a little bit more dense than a lot of the things that you're used to reading. So, you are probably not going to be able to do this with a single close, quick reading, right? Thankfully, like, both readings are short. They're each only about 4 pages long. So, what you should be doing as you are reading, right, in order to aid your own understanding, right, number one, summarize. Try to put the philosopher's arguments into your own words as you're reading. Right? If there are particularly difficult passages, put it into your own words, see if you can tease out what it means. Now, the big difficulty you'll have with Aristotle will be that he tends to get a little bit repetitive and pile sentences on top of sentences. So, what you will need to do is figure out what the important parts of those sentences are, right? What's the big important clause here? What's the stuff he's piling on top? How are these things related? Plato presents some different issues. I'll give you some reading questions to guide you in a minute. But yeah, summarize everything, particularly if you don't feel like you understand it. Secondly, the first time you run across what seems like a key word or a specialized word, define it for yourself, right? Sometimes you'll need to use context to do this because oftentimes the writer will assume you know what it means. But make sure that you know what the important terms are in each piece and that you are able to define them. Now, even though I've posted a PDF here of these online, it's probably a good idea for you to print out physical copies and just mark them up, right? If you can't do that, like if you're out of printing credits or whatever, then at least just take notes while you're reading. And I mean, what I usually do when I am reading something that I'm going to have to write about, right? I write questions and observations I have about what I'm reading in the margins. Right, this way I know what I was thinking when I was reading the piece, I know which parts of the piece particularly interested or confused me, right? I know which spots to go back to, and I've already sort of done some preliminary sort of engagement thinking with the piece, right? So these are strategies that will help you understand what it is you're doing. Now, as far as who is going to be doing what, we have, unfortunately, an odd number of people in this class, which always makes this sort of thing difficult. So, let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is there somebody who usually sits behind? Yeah, there is somebody who usually sits behind you, Emily, right? Yeah, her I already counted. Okay, yeah, right there. Yeah, right. He never shows up. Okay, so yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So, Quaishima to Chris, you guys will be taking on Plato. From Anna to Desjardins, who's not here, yes, then the rest of you will be taking on Aristotle. Okay, so does anybody, yes?
So you saying like we gonna write our side of the argument?
You're not going to write your side, you're going to write Aristotle's side.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. You are going to write a defense of, in this case, Aristotle's view of reality.
Right.
So So we're only writing the 500-word analysis for our side or for both sides?
For your side. But you will have to take the other side into account, right?
Oh, okay.
Because you are producing a defense here, right? So you have to anticipate the kinds of arguments that the other side is going to come after you with. Yeah, Milo, what were you going to say?
If we turn in a paper, we don't have to turn it to Georgia View.
You will turn it into Georgia View, but essentially you're going to have to come to class with something, right? That you can then sort of work, that you can use to work with when you're together with your group. You will upload your paper to Georgia View Thursday night, but you'll still need to come to class with something.
Thursday night or before Thursday in class?
Thursday night. You'll
Okay.
that way, like honestly, like if you decide you want to revise it a little bit,
Yeah.
when class is over,
Okay.
if something changes your viewpoints in discussion, then you'll have the chance to do that.
Gotcha.
So yeah, you will bring something to class with you on Thursday, but what you'll be graded on is what you'll upload Thursday night. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, no, go ahead. No, it's all right.
I just thought that okay, never mind. I was just confused. So you don't want us to upload it before class?
I do not want you to upload it before class, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes,
Sounds
give
good.
yourself the chance to fix it, to revise it
Okay.
after class.
All right.
All right. Anything else? Any other questions?
Do we have to bring a copy of both, since you said we have to read both of the readings?
Do you have to bring a copy of both with you to class, do you mean?
Yeah.
Of like the whole PDF?
Uh-huh.
If that's helpful to you. You don't necessarily have to bring the PDF with you to class, as long as you bring what you wrote about it to class. I mean, look, I get that, like, the university only gives you so many printing credits, and that, you will probably need to use a lot of them at midterm and at the end of the semester. So, I try not to make you use up too much paper in this class, but, if that's a concern, I understand, right? Any other questions? Well, if you think of any, right, feel free to stop me in the next few minutes. We're not quite done with this yet. So I do have some reading questions that you will both want to consider. Plate now, so that's a typo and a half. All right, so for those of you who are taking on Plato, this is what you're going to want to think about, right? First, look at the style in which he presents his argument, right? It's a dialogue between Socrates and his students, and Socrates explains himself to the student mostly in terms of metaphors, analogies, and stories. So, what does that actually have to do with Plato's theory of reality, right? So what that he presents these as stories and analogies? Secondly, what does Plato regard as most real? Physical objects, mathematical formulae, or the ideas from which both emanate? And there's a piece in there's the analogy of the divided line. Use that to help you figure out what Plato regards as most real and least real, right? There's a definite hierarchy there. And finally, in the story that Socrates tells about the prisoners in the cave, what does working your way towards reason and understanding entail, and what difficulties would doing so cause a person, right? Yeah, Kushima.
Is this on Georgia View?
It is not.
I mean, the PDF is.
Oh, the PDF of the two essays is on Georgia View, yes. This is not. So yeah, just take a minute, copy it down. and Aristotle people will get to you in a minute. There is actually a reason that I don't put this on George Revere, and it's nothing to do with simply being cruel to you. The fact that you have to copy it, down, right? Muscle memory actually increases your chance of remembering things. So. How many of you still are still copying? Okay. Take another minute. Not everyone writes at the same speed. Everybody done?
Do you recommend that we write the other philosopher's questions down as well?
It's probably not a bad idea. But these are the ones that are gonna be more important for your piece, for your edification.
Could you explain them through your
Sure. So the centerpiece of Plato's essay, right, is a story about a group of prisoners in a cave, right? So I want you to think about how he describes the process by which those prisoners work their way towards enlightenment.
Oh, we read.
And yeah, okay, so you're familiar with, you're a little bit familiar with it. Okay, that's good, yeah. And what difficulties the prisoners would have after being enlightened, right? When they go back to the cave. All right, anybody still working on this? All right, Aristotle people. This is what you're going to be thinking about. First, I want you to think about how Aristotle's idea of individual substance is related to sentence-level grammar. Right? How does he relate the idea of substance to parts of a sentence? What does it mean to be in or of a subject? Right? How are these things different? Secondly, what is a secondary substance? Does Aristotle treat the relationship between the universal and the particular the same way Plato does? And so what? And finally, it might help you if you try to relate Aristotle's idea of being to the concepts of abstract and concrete words that we talked about in class a few weeks ago. Right? Does everybody remember what the distinction was between an abstract and a concrete word? What's the difference? What's an abstract word?
Concept.
Yeah, an abstract word is a concept that doesn't give you a clear sense impression, right? A concrete word is a more specific one that gives you a much more particular sense impression. So get these copied down and just look up. Put your pencil down and look up when you're done. And if any of you have any questions about the readings or about what you're doing as you're working, right, just please do feel free to shoot me an email or come talk to me in my office.
Your email is on the syllabus, right? That's the one you want.
It is, yeah. It's just michael.moyer@GSW. Yeah. All right. Anybody still working on this? Everybody done? All right. No, not actually. Let me do that. Let me do this. Okay, so the last concept in rhetoric that we're going to be talking about for a while is arguably the most important when you're actually trying to put a paper together. But we're going to try to approach this, at least at first, from a more sort of inductive perspective, right? I'm going to put sentences on the board that are meant to be thesis statements, right? They're meant to be, what is a thesis statement?
It's like an extension of that, right? Basically, it's
A brief summary of the topic.
The main topic of the paper, basically.
Okay, you're all throwing out ideas that are kind of related to what a thesis statement is or does, right? But the primary thing that you need your thesis to be, right? The thesis is the controlling claim. that the paper makes.
Well,
Right.
what about like more research oriented rather than argument oriented?
You are still in just, you're not going to be doing in college level courses generally reports on anything. You're not really going to be doing any work that doesn't require you to make some kind of claim or some kind of argument. So pretty much all of the writing you're going to be doing in most of your classes is going to be thesis driven, right? You're going to have to make some sort of large claim about whatever evidence you've observed, right? Now, that large claim is going to be backed up by a number of smaller claims that you've drawn from evidence, right? We're going to be looking for, in those smaller claims and the evidence that you're examining, are something that points to a bigger theme or a bigger idea, right? So, two things a thesis needs to be, right? It needs to be relatively narrow, right? It must point to a specific direction, a specific theme or idea that you want to discuss in the paper. It must also be arguable, right? It has to be something that someone else looking at the same evidence could conceivably disagree with. Right now, as we said with all interpretations, right? It has to be plausible. It has to be, directly connected to the evidence that you've observed. But it also has to be something that someone else could disagree with, right? Someone else has to be able to take this evidence and look at it in a different way. Okay, so I'm going to put a sentence on the board here. This is a proposed thesis statement. And I want you to tell me what's wrong with it. I intend to examine cultural appropriation in the video for Amish Paradise. What's wrong with this as a thesis statement?
It's more of a fact, not a.
Well, it's not a claim, it's just a statement.
Yeah, it's a statement
Yeah.
of what the assignment is.
Yeah, I'm telling you what I intend to do very, very broadly, right? But I'm not making any sort of claim about my subject. I'm saying, okay, I'm going to talk about cultural appropriation in this particular video, but I'm not giving you any sort of signal as to what I'm going to say or how I think cultural appropriation works in the video, or why I think it might be a problem or not a problem or what have you, right? All right, so how would we go about fixing this?
You could start off by saying cultural appropriation in the video has something to do with something else.
Make a
Okay.
connection with cultural appropriation
Yeah.
in the video.
Yeah, I should be explaining how I think cultural appropriation works in the video, right? So, right, I can say something like, by lampooning two cultures to which he doesn't belong, that Yankovic unintentionally, say, perpetuates stereotypes about those cultures, right, in the service of making a joke, right? So, you know, this is still probably not a 100% perfect thesis statement, but at least I'm making a claim now, right? I've made it clear why I think this particular element of the video is problematic, right? It's like, okay, what do I mean by cultural appropriation? Well, I mean, you know, a white Canadian Jewish guy doing a hip hop song about the Amish, right? And doing it in a way that kind of makes fun of urban black culture and Amish culture. So when you've got no claim, right? Simplest way to fix this, right? Get more specific, add a claim. Talk about what particular problem in the material you want to think about, you want to address. All right, so let's try another one here. All right. The women's suffrage movement succeeded in getting women in the U.S. the right to vote.
Still just a statement.
Yeah, is anybody really going to argue with this?
No, that's a fact.
Yeah. This isn't just not making a claim, right? This is a basic statement of historical fact. And you can't really argue on behalf of a fact, right? Now you can argue over the interpretation of a fact, right? You can dig into the details of a particular historical fact and find things that can be contested, right? So, what are some ways that we could fix this? What are some ways that we could make this arguable?
Perhaps mention some of the processes that they had to go through.
Okay, yeah, that's one thing you could, yeah. What we've got here says nothing at all about the methods they used, right? It's just the basic historical fact that the movement succeeded. So you could look into the different methods that the movement employed and make an argument about which methods were successful and which were not, right? And why. You could also look at other goals the movement might have had that weren't achieved, or historical inequities within the movement itself, right? You know, when women were first granted the right to vote, for example, were all American women given the right to vote? And so what that some were left out? So, again, what you have to do with the statement of fact, right, is find something to contest, find something to argue about within the fact itself. Okay. Number 3 here. All right, how many of you have seen the movie Titanic?
Yeah.
All right, virtually everyone. Okay, that's why I use this as an example. I actually freaking hate Titanic, but it seems to be extremely well known. All right. So,
Historical.
Some of it is my sort of latent inner social justice warrior that gets angry about who survives and who dies.
Yeah. The fact that there's enough room on the plank for Jack.
There's plenty of room on that friggin' door. Plenty of room on that door. And also, I mean, it's also like It's basically a sappy love story dressed up as historical drama.
Yeah.
And I hate sappy love stories because I have no heart and no soul.
Okay. Savage.
All right. So, Jack and Rose's relationship in Titanic, and we'll come back to this, demonstrates that love overcomes all obstacles.
Oh,
Yeah, okay. Factually incorrect, right? But what's the problem? Where's the problem in this thesis statement? What's the problem phrase?
It's lying to me.
It's opinionated.
Well, I mean, a thesis does have to express
Well, I mean, yeah,
some.
but I guess what I'm trying to say is that this is too empathetic.
It's too feely.
Yeah. There's not enough concrete.
Okay,
facts.
yeah. There's nothing concrete to latch onto in here. And why is there nothing concrete to latch onto? What phrase makes it impossible to find something concrete in this? Yeah, have you heard some formulas? Have you heard some formulation of this before? Right, love overcomes all obstacles.
Yeah.
Right, love can jump any hurdle. Love conquers all. Right.
Yeah. I mean, you've heard it, but you can't prove it. Like,
Okay. Well, not only can you not prove it, right? Like we hear it all the time
Yeah.
because it's what's called a cliche. Now, cliches are these kind of formulaic phrases that we've picked up in various places over our lives, right? That we often use as sort of quick substitutes for original thought. Right? They often sort of come in the form of pithy little sayings that we think we understand but actually don't. But yeah, love conquers all, love overcomes all obstacles, right, is one of these cliches. It's something that sounds nice and maybe makes us feel good to think it, but it's empty of content, right? It's empty of ideas here. And it tries to apply a specific relationship in a specific movie to a ridiculously general case, right? So what will we do with this? Take it the other way?
Jack
Is that what
and
you said?
Rose's love.
So yeah, so what we would want to do is problematize the cliche, right? We can actually find an idea here within the cliche. We can find some way in which, in fact, their love does not overcome
a giant book.
all obstacles, right? Like, a giant iceberg. We can probably find something that is, more helpful in the realm of ideas there, right? But essentially, yeah, what you want to do if you find yourself thinking in terms of a cliche, right? If you put in your thesis statement an idea that sounds really, really familiar to you, but you're not sure where you heard it, you're probably thinking in cliches. And what you want to do is try to find a way to break the cliche, right? Find a way in which what you're looking at doesn't fit the cliche. All right, number 4. The Atlanta Braves are the best team in baseball. Yes, and I know the number of snickers that I hear coming from you indicate that yes, there are plenty of factual challenges that one could level at this statement. But apart from factual accuracy here, what else is wrong with this?
There's
It's a
no
lie.
observation like proven to us. So.
Okay, yeah, there's no real observation here, right?
And it just blatantly uses an absolute.
It's a lie.
The best.
You're fond of that word.
Yeah, there's no reason to back it up. Why you think that?
They lost 8-2 yesterday.
Yeah, they did. They do that a lot. But the word best is an indicator here of what the real problem is. Now, why would you think the Atlanta Braves are the best team in baseball? Without any sort of other
Brainwashing.
Because your dad said that.
Because your dad said that, right? Or because it's a matter of personal preference, right?
Cultural brainwashing.
Cultural brainwashing. You love them because they're your team, right? Just like you love the Detroit Tigers, the New York Yankees, or the San Francisco Giants, or whatever, if they're your team, right? This doesn't mean that objectively, in any sense, your team is the best team, right? Best is an evaluative term. Now, the problem with this, is that it is a mere statement of personal preference. Now, if you wanted to make this more analytical, you could make some sort of argument about, say, the Braves' strengths as a team relative to their weaknesses, right? And if you think those strengths outweigh the weaknesses, okay, then that's something, that's an argument. If you think those weaknesses outweigh the strengths, that's also an argument. The point is, you can't simply say, because I like this team, that they are the best team in baseball. The same goes with anything that you love without reservation, or hate with the deepest fibers of your being, or to which you feel the most intense indifference. I don't know if you can feel intense indifference, but so be it. The point is that personal preference is not grounds for argument, right? Whether you like something or don't. All right, almost done with this, and then we'll move on to something else. Number 5. Cover trout fishing in America. Uses counterculture to sell itself, or uses identification with the counterculture to sell itself. I mean, this is arguable, right?
Right. Doesn't use absolutes like best or all.
Okay, yeah, doesn't use absolutes like best or all. Doesn't seem to be a matter of personal like or dislike, right? For the book or for the counterculture. So what is wrong? So what's wrong with this?
Doesn't make any mention of who it's selling itself to, other than counterculture.
Okay, yeah, the term counterculture is pretty broad, right?
Yeah.
And could refer to a lot of different groups that don't necessarily like each other or align with each other.
Or fishing.
Or fishing, yeah. Or fishing. So the problem with this is that the claim is too broad. Right. It's not quite so broad as to be completely meaningless, but it's almost there. So what you want to do is try to whittle something like this down to something more specific, right? Okay, so how is the book using counterculture to sell itself? Or is there something problematic in the way it uses counterculture to sell itself? So we could say that while the cover makes Brodigan the author look like a hippie, the positioning of the Ben Franklin statue and the woman suggest more conservative leanings, right? The fact that he's in front of a statue of, one of the founders of the country, and that the woman in the picture is sitting at its feet, right, suggest that this hippie is perhaps not as freewheeling as he would like you to think. Now, there's one more specific type of bad thesis statement that I see a lot of. So I really want, it's not in the textbook, but I want you to be aware of it. If you see yourself doing this in your own thesis statements, you know that you are on the wrong track and are going to need to revise this. Poe's short story, The Fall of the House of Usher. Anybody ever read it?
Yes.
Oh, good. Is concerned with madness, incest, and heredity. There's something about the very form of this sentence. What's that?
Thesis now.
Yes. This is the shopping list thesis, right? Now, I know that this comes from a very specific place, right? How many of you were taught to write 5-paragraph essays when you were in high school? Okay, that's just about everybody. And I wish that high school teachers would stop doing that, because it's not going to help you in college, right? It does teach you to organize information, but it doesn't teach you how to explore an idea. It doesn't teach you how to make a convincing argument, right? Essentially, what the 5-paragraph essay teaches you to do is pick a relatively simple 3-part idea that is easy to prove, right? And all you're doing is proving your idea right or wrong. That is not what you're going to be doing in a course like this, or really in just about any other course that you're taking. So, what you need to do when you find yourself making the shopping list, right, there is going to be some reason you chose all 3 of these elements. So what you need to think about is what they have in common. Right, what do these 3 things in your shopping list thesis have to do with each other? Why did you pick them out? And what else can you do with how that bigger theme or idea works in the narrative, right? Or in whatever it is you're looking at. So that's the way out of the shopping list thesis. And I'm sure that some of you will turn things into me at various points that have a shopping list thesis in it. It always happens. And I will happily sit down with you and talk you through how to stop doing that, right? But I just want you to be aware of this, and that this is not the way you should be structuring your writing, right? That this particular form of the sentence should be a warning to you. Okay, so for the first real paper you're going to have to do for this course, the thesis is sort of given, right? Or at least the way to get to a thesis is sort of given, right? I've given you a statement, about whether or not human action can be meaningful based on the arguments made by the philosophers we're reading. And it'll be up to you to decide to what extent you think that's true or false, right? Not just, straight up true or false, to what extent. We'll go over that later on. But essentially, right, your process for the first paper is going to be more or less deductive, right? The topic is given, and you just have to figure out how to work with the evidence to answer the question. Most of the work you're going to be doing after that, not just in this class but in other courses, is going to be inductive, right? So you are going to be looking at some set of data, and you will be asked to come to your own conclusions about it. So I want to just do a sort of quick exercise in drawing those kinds of conclusions from a body of evidence, right? Okay, so we've already determined that everybody has seen Titanic, right? So everybody knows that the boat sinks, right?
Really?
It does,
No.
yeah. Yeah, that's the way it happened. So, is the boat sinking, though, is the boat itself the primary focus of the movie? What is the primary focus of the movie? I'm sorry, what did you say, Joe?
It's like the sad love story between Jack and Rose.
Okay, so we have it right. This love story between Jack and Rose, right? That's actually what we spend much, much more time on in the movie than the problem with the boat, right? So we can already determine that the whole thing about the boat, right, is really just a kind of backdrop for this love story. So they might be related to each other in some way, but we're maybe not sure how yet. So boat disaster as backdrop. Now, what can we say about our two young protagonists? Let's start with our male protagonist, Jack. What can we say about him?
Middle to working class.
Okay, working class to poor, right? What else can we say about him?
Character doesn't have any like responsibilities.
Okay, yeah. No family or responsibilities, right? No real ties to anyone or anything on land.
He's taking care of himself.
Okay.
Independent.
Takes care of himself. I'm sorry, what did you say, Ezra?
I just said independent.
Okay.
Stop that.
Yep, independent. Has to be.
He was an artist, wasn't
He's an artist, yes. Draw me like one of your French girls, yes. An artist.
he? Wasn't he like a hustler?
Yeah, kind of borderline criminally, right?
Yeah. Some gambling.
Yeah. In fact, how does he manage to get on the ship?
He was playing He won some tickets and papers.
Yeah, so he's only there by chance, right? He didn't plan to be on this ship. Now, what about Rose? What can we say about Rose? Okay, yep. Upper class family, at least.
She has a certain image that she's supposed to maintain.
Okay. So she's subject to a lot of social pressure, right?
She's a cheater.
Pardon?
She's a cheater.
Well, let's just say she had a prearranged marriage.
Okay, yeah, she has this kind of arranged marriage, right? Yes.
Not happy with it.
Yes, because, her fiance is an incredible douche, right?
Yeah, put it lightly.
Yes. Right, she's engaged to a walking, talking turd. What else?
She's well known.
Okay, yeah, people know who she is, right? Kind of debutante type.
Naughty parents.
Yep. Snooty parents and associates.
She was unhappy.
Yes. She is deeply unhappy.
Yeah, because like they meet, like she's trying to jump off the boat.
Yep.
Suicide.
She ended up being more calm.
Well, let's not worry yet about how she ends up, and let's worry more about how she is at the beginning for now. So, yeah, she tries suicide, and this is how they meet, right? So, would these two characters have encountered each other if they were not on the enclosed floating ecosystem of a cruise ship? Probably not, right? It's highly unlikely that our young hero would have just happened to be hanging out on top of a building when she comes to throw herself off of it, right? So the ship is what allows them to be in the special nature of the cruise ship. So we can say, maybe as a kind of preliminary thesis, right, that the ship creates a kind of special world that ignores class difference. Now, if we dig a little deeper into the evidence, does this idea hold up?
No.
Why not?
Because the lower class people are lower on the ship, whereas the socialites are, they got all the nice, rooms.
And then also when Jack tries to go to the dinner, he's very blatantly just getting shoved out of the way.
Okay, yeah. So, right, we have people still physically separated on the ship, right? Just as they're physically separated in neighborhoods in a real city, right? Poor people and rich people do not live in the same neighborhoods. Poor people and rich people do not occupy the same decks on the ship, right? The rich people have the upper decks, the poor people have the lower decks. So, Jack, when he goes to the upper decks, or he's invited to the upper decks, as a thank you for stopping Rose from throwing herself off of the boat. How's he treated when he gets up there?
Very poorly trash.
Very poorly, right? Everybody's condescending to him, right? It's, all right, you get your one nice meal now, back into steerage with you, right? Dirty, dirty poor person. Now, so he is unable to blend with the upper class people, right? With the exception of Rose. Now, when Rose is brought down below decks, how is she welcomed?
She's like one of them.
Rose, yeah, or at least she
tries it.
Yeah, she's given hospitality there, right? They're certainly much nicer to her than the people were above decks to Jack. But does she really fit in?
No.
Yeah, this is still clearly not her world, right? Now we can then relate this to what ultimately happens when the boat hits the iceberg, right?
Yeah.
What's that?
Everybody's equal.
No.
Are they?
Well,
All of the aristocrats got to the lifeboats first.
Yeah, there aren't enough lifeboats. And the people who are down below decks, right, get locked in.
Yeah.
And only the people who are above, the women and children who are above decks
I have a child.
are permitted. Yeah, right, Mr. Assface there. Yeah. So the people who are above decks, the richer people, get access to all the lifeboats, and those who choose not to get on the lifeboats to make room for others get the chance to heroically sacrifice themselves and be remembered fondly, right? The old rich guys who sit in the dining room smoking and having a brandy while the band continues to play, right? It's like, well, we'll give up our spots on the lifeboat so that others can survive. And you've got the rich woman from Colorado who leads the lifeboats to safety, right? So the rich people who die are given, and even some who survive are given a chance for heroism, right? The poor people who die just die, right? So what we actually see here in a lot of ways is the ship reinforcing the class structure on land, right? This little romance kind of makes it look like there's some cross-class action happening here, but this is the exception rather than the rule. The rule on the ship is still everybody in their assigned place. And I think that this is brought home to us even in the relationship between our two principles here, right? Who lives and who dies.
Was that not rhetorical?
It's not rhetorical.
Oh.
I don't typically do rhetorical questions. I don't believe in rhetorical questions.
Word. The poor guy.
The poor guy dies and the rich girl lives, right? Despite, as we've already noted, ample room on that goddamn door, right? Plenty of space for him to climb up. But no, let's let him freeze to death in the water.
I mean, it may not have like supported the weight of them both. You don't know how buoyant that door was.
Well, I didn't try.
That's true. They sure as hell didn't give it a shot, did they?
You know, college drop.
What gets me the most is like she says that I'm not gonna let go, and then she lets go.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And gets to live a new life with his name.
Yeah.
So she even kind of steals his identity.
I think that goes with the sappy love story part of it. She's like, well, we didn't get our happily ever after, but I'm still gonna take your last name.
Yeah, but there's still something kind of icky about that.
Yeah.
Right? But, you know, it's like, yeah, okay. It's like I'm gonna be.
But you're not
gonna be you now.
Now
Yeah.
that you're dead.
Yeah. And it's a way out for her
Yeah.
of
Her family never finds
her class trap, right? But she's the only one who actually gets to escape. She's the only one for whom there's a way out. So if we had to formulate a better thesis based on the evidence here, right? Here is what I usually come up with, something sort of like this. The destruction of the ship and the question of who gets to survive thus becomes emblematic of the social hierarchies the film seems to want to criticize, but can't bring itself to. So, right, this is a more complete, more specific, more problematized version of the original idea, right? And that's essentially what I want you to try to get at when you're coming up with a thesis statement. Right? Your first idea is usually going to be based on relatively superficial observations. So once you've got that first idea, right, just keep applying more pieces of evidence to it, more specific pieces of evidence to it, and try to narrow it down. Right? Try to make it more specific. You will probably end up with a longer sentence as a result, with a longer thesis, but that's because the argument that you're making is getting more detailed, more narrow, more specific, right? If you find you have like a really short single clause thesis statement, then your idea is probably too broad. Yes?
What's the word after social?
Hierarchy.
Hierarchies. Now, I I was going to talk a little bit about how to work with introductions and conclusions and what this has to do with your thesis, but we're running kind of short on time, so we'll pick that up at the very beginning of next class, and then we'll do all the philosophical stuff. So I'm just going to let you go now, and we'll see you on Thursday. And like I said, if you have any questions as you're working about the philosophy stuff, please do feel free to contact me.